The crazy pacing of this arc keeps suggesting to me that we're going to be getting a pretty abrupt ending to it very soon. We got pacifistas blowing stuff up all over the place, Luffy just lost his Gear 5, Kuma's flying towards the island as we speak, and an ancient giant suit of armor just woke up. And so given the way Oda typically does things, I'm actually expecting that his end of the year Jump Festa announcement will be that we will be in Elbaf at the start of 2024. So I'm definitely imagining Kuma showing up by the end of the year to paw fruit the crew to safety and on to the land of giants. Now, in addition to reminding us what KOH actually looks like, I also thought that the color spread featuring Ryuma and the rest of the Shimotsuki family that Oda drew to promote the Monsters anime fit very well with the chapter's ending. See, not only does Bonnie pull out a sword out of seemingly nowhere to be able to stab Saint Saturn, but also Saturn's transformation really reminds me of the symbol on Ushimaru's cloak that we saw him wearing during the Wano flashback. Also, I think this is a pretty important time to remember that Zoro has an attack called Gyuki Yusume, which is another name for the demon bull, or the Ushi Oni, that Saturn's design is based on. And speaking of Japanese mythology, after Bonnie uses her near-death experience power on the Marines, one of them says that they had an encounter with the Sanzu River, which is said to be a body of water that one must cross after dying to reach the afterlife. Now, there are 3 pathways to cross the river into the afterlife, and the pathway one must use to cross gets increasingly more difficult in accordance with the degree of sinning that one committed while alive.
Now, the official translation actually uses the term the Styx River, which is basically the equivalent of the Sanzu River, but in Greek mythology. So it's a river in Hades. A river in the underworld.
Now, even though the idea of an afterlife isn't new in One Piece, because we could probably trace it all the way back to Thriller Bark when we learned that Brook's soul spent a year searching for its own body, due to the thickness of the fog of the Florian Triangle, I have noticed, though, that Oda has made an effort to give souls in the afterlife more and more focus in the story, typically in the form of a short tease. It's almost like he keeps whispering to the reader, hey, just so you know, there's this thing called an afterlife in this story that I'm telling, and it might turn out to be relevant to the ending, so for now, you might want to keep a mental note of it in the back of your mind. And on the subject of highlighting things, Oda ends up doing the same thing for Sanji's speed. I thought him feeling like the Vega tank was just too slow for him, and then zigzag blitzing his way downstairs like Senetsu from Demon Slayer really worked to frame how serious the situation is. Not only that, but his lady-related observation hockey is also once again shown to be in a league of its own, and he gets a bit of a character relatability moment there with Bonnie, because given his own relationship with Judge, Sanji says that he understands that sometimes accepting the reality in regards to our own family can be pretty heartbreaking. So that whole sequence I thought made up a really good character moment for Sanji.
And the whole mention of the clouds of the road, as well as the clouds on the wheels of the Vega tank being sticky or sticking together, kind of reminded me of a power that Nami has, or an ability that she can use with her Climatact, which is basically that she can create like a Milky Road, a road of clouds, but she hasn't used that feature in such a long time. I actually forgot that she had it. So I wonder if Oda drawing attention to the sticky feature of the clouds is going to play a role in this.
Turns out Vice Admiral Bluegrass, who shows up hijacking a pacifista using her devil fruit power, is actually named after a genre of American roots music that started in the 1940s. And so that can explain why she's wearing headphones and also why she looks like she could be in her 80s. And though it's a little bit hard to notice at first, the Vice Admiral that has a giant seashell as a hammer, he actually has the power of a Zoan devil fruit, specifically that of a sea otter. You can actually see his full hybrid form with his otter tail and everything right before he comes down with his attack. Plus, him wielding a seashell is a reference to how sea otters use rocks as tools to help them crack open shells for them to eat. We cut back to Luffy versus Kizaru, and Borsalino's statement there about not being able to accomplish his mission if he keeps fighting Luffy, coupled with Luffy's statement, makes it glaringly obvious now that both characters have different priorities aside from finishing each other off. Kizaru's priority is to be able to assassinate Vegapunk while simultaneously protecting Punk Records, the Mother Flame Station, as well as York. And so I highly suspect that those limitations are keeping Borsalino from using his awakening in this context. At the same time, Luffy's main priority is to escape Egghead along with Vegapunk and the rest of his crew, which is why we literally got a reminder from Jinbei last chapter of him saying that he was going to carry out Vegapunk's luggage. And so that also serves to explain why it is that Luffy is just barely deciding to infuse his attacks with Advanced Conqueror's Haki. Luffy was like, okay, well my Gear 5 is about to run out, so I better make this next hit count. The hit creates a cartoony I'm seeing stars effect and sends Kizaru flying into a building, and then Luffy completely deflates. And what I'm guessing is going to happen is that he's going to have to restart his heart again, And that's when the ancient robot slash ancient giant is going to show up. Now, when it comes to Saturn's double fruit power, I've said this before actually, but the powers of the Gorosei just don't seem normal to me. Like, even by mythical Zoan type standards, they're weird. It's like we need to add a new category under mythical type Zoans that belongs to the demon types. So if we go back to that scene in the throne room with Emu, I said this before when the chapter came out, but the thing that seems to trigger the transformation of the Gorosei in that scene is Sabo using a fire explosion attack on them in the first place. And in this chapter, the way that Saturn is summoned is through a symbol on the ground, specifically a pentagram. But before he shows up, we see a huge explosion, and that explosion has Haki, and we also see fire surrounding the circle. So a fiery explosion triggering the summoning in both instances is interesting. It gets me to think that maybe they were sealed by fire a long time ago. Now this is also where I need to give credit to Oda's foreshadowing, because in chapter 233, which is the chapter where we first get introduced to the Gorosei, we do see a star design slash pattern seal on the room that they're in. Plus the pentagram that's used to summon hybrid form Saturn could also be a reference to the name of the Gorosei, which means the 5 elder stars. You get it? 5 elder stars that are summoned by a 5-point star each. Appearance-wise, I find it pretty interesting that Saturn's spider legs seem to have the devil fruit spiral pattern on them, and we also saw the same pattern above the silhouettes of the Holy Knights when they were introduced as well. Plus the way that Saturn's beard looks reminds me a lot of Luffy's gooey hair as he awakened Gear 5. Now, according to a legend from the Wakayama Prefecture in Japan, it is said that when a traveler makes direct eye contact with the Ushi Oni, it is impossible for them to avert their gaze. So the Ushi Oni ends up killing the person by draining their soul energy. Now, whether this is a mythical type Zoan related feature when it comes to Saturn, or he's actually exerting a much more broken and sinister version of Conqueror's Haki, that remains to be explained. But if I had to make a guess, I'd say that maybe it's a mixture of both things acting in unison with each other. Because Oda has already shown something similar with Big Mom's Soul Pocus technique, where she's able to combine the intimidation factor of her Conqueror's Haki with the power of the Soru Soru no Mi to be able to take away the lifespan of the people that fear her. I remember back when Wano was still going on, I read a really good theory about how that was going to be Usopp's test, that he would run into Big Mom and he would have to showcase his bravery in order for Soul Pocus to not have an effect on him. So maybe a situation like that will still be able to happen in Elbaf. And speaking of Usopp, I cannot for the life of me figure out who's in that little cart that him and Nami are pushing. My best guess is that it's either Robin or Stussy, but let me know in the comments section if you think it's somebody else. Now, the main thing that jumped out at me this week was how we can actually make a connection between the reveal of Saturn's transformation and Film Red. And yes, I know, Film Red is technically not canon, but the character of Uta is canon. Plus, I've noticed that Oda sometimes tries to hide hints in the One Piece movies that he's in charge of supervising. So in case you haven't seen Film Red or can't remember much of it, the main antagonist of the film is a creature that gets summoned by Uta known as the Demon King, or Tot Musica, which according to Robin is a demon of the ancient world that was created out of human emotions. Now the way the story goes, one night while Uta and the red hair pirates were on the island of Elegia, Uta was asked to give a concert that could be heard throughout the entire kingdom. And so her singing ended up reaching the depths of the Elegia castle, which ended up awakening a musical score that if performed could end up summoning the Demon King. You can even see some demon designs in the margins of the musical charts if you look close enough. Anyway, the charts found their way to Uta and tempted her, and she ended up singing the song which broke the seal and set the creature loose. And the shots I'm showing you right now are actual screenshots from the movie, from the scene where the Demon King gets summoned. So aside from Lucky Roo being sent flying, the scene is very similar to the effects of Saturn being summoned onto the island. And to my earlier point about how I think that the Gorosei's powers are not normal, the most important thing to keep in mind here is that the Demon King, or Tot Musica, is not technically classified as a double fruit power. It's a demon, and it is summoned by the power of a paramecia, right? You do need the power of the Uta Uta no Mi to be able to summon it, but by itself, the Demon King is not a paramecia, it's not a Zoan, and it's not a Logia. It's a being of its own that was trapped and wanted to be unleashed.
Now, if I wanted to play devil's advocate here, pun intended, and say that Saturn's devil fruit was actually a mythical type Zoan, I'm pretty sure that it would fall under the family of the Ushi Ushi no Mi. So similar to Dalton's devil fruit, it would be the Ushi Ushi no Mi, except instead of the model being the bison, it would be like Ushi Oni or Gyuki or Demon Bull. I just don't think it's a devil fruit power. I think Imu and the Gorosei go beyond the power of devil fruits, and that's why it's so weird. Now, it's not super uncommon that Oda decides not to reveal the name of the devil fruit when the character is first seen using it. Like, I remember when we first saw Kaido as a dragon, we didn't get an Oda box for it. We didn't learn the name of it until much later. And then Kid's Devil Fruit, I remember that it took so long for Oda to actually reveal the name of it that he actually forgot that he hadn't revealed it in the manga. So he ended up revealing it in an SBS instead. So again, it's not super uncommon that Oda decides not to reveal the name of a devil fruit with the power's introduction, but it does kind of get you to wonder, like, why is that information being kept from us? Especially because in the same arc, we have Stussy, who is able to sprout wings, and look like a demon. And we also don't get an explanation for what that is yet. Additionally, the official translation actually has Jinbei saying, "What is this unearthly presence?" So Jinbei is literally saying that the presence that he's sensing is not from this earth. And then, and this is the thing that really pushed it over the edge for me and got me to think about the Demon King being sealed in the depths of the castle and all that stuff. When Saturn shows up, he says, the surface. It has been such a long time. We know from the story that there is a tendency from the world government to label anything or anyone that goes against it as evil, right? We talk about the Will of D. Those are the enemies of the gods. We can look at somebody like Robin being from O'Hara and her being labeled as the demon child or the devil child. I've said this before, but in my opinion, I think the reason for why devil fruits are called devil fruits in the first place is because the world government knew or knows that the devil fruits were created by Joy Boy / Nika, because we know that Nika liked making people smile. So I think Nika liked making people's wishes come true, so he would create devil fruits for people. And so I think that the government knows that, and after they wiped out Joy Boy, after the Void Century War, the world government started calling those fruits devil fruits. Those are evil fruits that we associate with Joy Boy. Now, we also know from Whitebeard that the top of the Red Line, before the times of Marijoa, was known as the Land of Gods. So what I think happened in the past was that there were such beings as gods. There were gods in the past, but there were also creatures / beings known as demons. So the War of the Void Century was the demon side versus Joy Boy's side. Obviously, Joy Boy's side lost, but Joy Boy found a way of returning because of the devil fruits, right? He said, I'm going to put myself in this, maybe like I can leave behind a trace of my soul or of my essence in this devil fruit, so that if somewhere down the line somebody is worthy, I can reawaken. Now, as a consequence of the war, Joy Boy and his friends were able to maybe seal some of the demons away, but the demons did not need a plan B to come back. Like, they don't need devil fruits because they won the war, ultimately. So they never technically died. They've always been there. It's just that maybe after the war, they decided that they were going to rule the world from the shadows. Which reminds me of something that an elder tells Akainu at one point, because Akainu is upset at the Gorosei, and one of the Gorosei tells him, remember, Sakazuki, that the Marines are only the public face of the government. Speaking of that, I do have a quick note to make, because in the official translation, when Saturn arrives and shows himself, somebody says, Commodores and below are not even allowed to have an audience with the Gorosei, with the elders. However, another translation I read kind of gave me another impression of that same dialogue, because the other translation pretty much had the guy saying to the other Marines, he was telling the other Marines, if you are Commodore rank and below, don't look at Saturn. So that translation made it seem more of like a Conqueror's hockey type deal, where if you're too weak, you can't withstand this, so just mind your own business for your own safety. Which is interesting because according to this official Marine ranking from Oda, a Commodore is one rank above a captain. And so we know that characters like Kobe and Tashigi are captains, right? So it got me to think, wait, if Kobe and Tashigi were there and they looked at Saturn, like, would that mean that their heads would also blow up? But again, the official translation makes it seem as if it's more of a policy thing. Like, if you're Commodore rank or below, you'll never be able to request an actual audience with the Gorosei. Now, I don't know if Bonnie wounding Saturn with a sword is actually going to do anything, like if that actually caused any kind of damage. But I do think it's interesting that there was a point as the Marines were arriving on the island where Saturn completely underestimated Bonnie. Doberman was telling him, "Excuse me, Mr. Saturn, like we know that Jewelry Bonnie is on the island. What do you want us to do with her?" And Saturn essentially says, like, that girl, she's Kuma's daughter. Like, we don't need her anymore. Just forget about her. Like, ignore her, or just leave her there. No big deal. And yet she's the one who actually, lands the first hit on him. We also get to read an internal dialogue inside Bonnie's mind, which I'm pretty sure relates to the memories that she saw, in Kuma's flashback. And so it's pretty obvious, right? From the beginning, she wanted to kill Vegapunk. That was her target. That was her aim. After she watches those memories belonging to her father, her target now changes to the Gorosei. So she no longer cares about killing Vegapunk, but she's actually targeting the elders, or a elder. So it's pretty obvious that that memory that Bonnie saw involved the Gorosei in some capacity giving the order to Vegapunk to erase Kuma's will. Finally, just to bring things back to the idea of the Demon King and how that concept of creatures like these existing in the One Piece world was suggested about a year ago with film Red, I always found it interesting that when Top Musica first appears in the movie, it actually has 3 skulls attached to it. And so it got me to think about Blackbeard automatically, especially because in the movie, Uta has to be awake to be able to sustain this world where the Demon King can be summoned. And so in the film, we know that she's actually eating a mushroom that allows her to stay awake so that she doesn't sleep, which is something, of course, we know that Blackbeard is known for. So I wonder if there's a connection there between Blackbeard and him having something to do with a possible demon as well. Perhaps the demon of the deep, known as Davy Jones, as I've theorized. I mean, because these demons are no joke. Like in the movie, it took 2 Yonko crews to be able to take it out. And that is going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching and for all of your support. I hope you guys have a great start to your week. Take care. Leave me your comments. Tell me your thoughts about the points that I raised. And I'll catch you guys later. Bye.